In March of 2008, developers at Nadeo were just a few weeks away from releasing Trackmania Nations Forever and doing the last adjustments to the 65 official tracks in the game, when in one of the final closed beta tests, a player spotted and reported a huge weakness that required attention on the track C14 Endurance. This track has a big loop in the middle of it, and the player had discovered that it could be entirely skipped by jumping out to the side of it with a barrel roll and landing back down on the track below, saving 2.5 seconds. A big time save considering how optimized Trackmania speedruns are. When hearing of this, Nadeo immediately blocked it, placing additional scenery that would prevent the flip from working. Phew, disaster avoided, they must have thought. But little could they have known that despite fixing this one shortcut, C14 would still go on to become the most broken track in the entire game. Welcome to the world record history of C14 Endurance. The story begins with the first record ever submitted to the C14 leaderboards, a 1 minute 54 by Rommel, on the 16th of April 2008, the same day as the game released. The track starts out gently, with a long straight followed by a loop up to the first checkpoint. It continues with a long platform turn and goes through the loop that was skipped in the beta test. If you've driven the map at full speed, you'll be fast enough to clear the following jump over the chicane directly to the second checkpoint. And here you can also land aiming the car to the right, as you will immediately go down into a steep hill, followed by the hairpin turn. Rommel was clearly struggling here, and in his defense, it's a very difficult turn. But he had a strategy that didn't seem half bad. Going out to the right and crashing the wall on purpose provided him a lot more comfort, and could perhaps be faster. After the hairpin, the track opens up to a long gentle turn that takes you all the way back to the start, where you do everything 2 more times, but now with much more speed. And so, the turns become harder to control. Rommel was often letting off the acceleration in order to combat this, trying to avoid any big mistakes, and at the end of lap 3, he clocked in with a time of 1:54.23. But of course, this record wouldn't stand for long. Later that same day, and over the next couple of days, many others would play C14 and beat Rommel's time, and the world record was brought down to a 1:52. On the 20th of April, the player Remix took a huge leap forward, when he brought the record down almost 2 seconds by himself, completely smoking the competition. Remix was already one of the top players in a previous Trackmania game, and it didn't really come as a shock to anyone that he had managed to beat the record. But the way he did it was surprising, as in the hairpin turn, he intentionally crashed the wall on the right, just like Rommel, and when driven with clean lines, it was much faster. Not only was it the most efficient way to slow down for the hairpin, but the additional space allowed him to carry more speed onto the following straight. Across all 3 laps, this strategy gained him 1.58 seconds in total, and the remaining time he gained by taking greater risks in the long platform turn. All in all, a massive improvement. But it as well would be beaten in less than a day by the player France, who managed to get the first sub 150 with a 1:49.98. Also doing the wallbang strategy. The next day, Remix wanted his record back, and he had found another optimization. In the downhill before the hairpin turn, he drifted towards the wall, allowing him to crash it earlier and get redirected with a much sharper line towards the 2 corners. At first, he beat the record with a 1:49.55, but later the same day, he improved again to a 1:48.56. Gaining almost 1 second in total in the wallbang segment alone. This record would stand for over a month, until the 30th of May, when it was barely sniped away by Vampire, setting a new world record by 0.02 of a second. But after this, several months would pass with no new improvements on C14 Endurance. During that time, the by far most dominant player in the game was Cluthu, who held multiple world records on the A and B maps in the campaign. Entering the autumn, it had been about 2 months since Cluthu last uploaded a personal best, and his competitors started to wonder where he had gone. On the 25th of October, Cluthu revealed that he had been playing Trackmania that entire time, when he all at once posted new world records on 13 out of 15 tracks in the Blue Series, one of them being C14, where he smashed the world record by 0.6 of a second, driving the first ever 1:47. This record raised the bar on the map considerably, as Clutho's run consisted of the fastest ever laps 1, 2, and 3, with a stunning 34.19 last lap. It was a really strong mark for its time, strong enough to deter many players from trying to go up against it, and activity on the leaderboard once again slowed down. 2009 came and went with only one more improvement on C14, a 1:47.73 by Villivano. But in 2010, things started to heat up again. The player Diablo was going for his first Trackmania world record, and he chose C14 as his arena. Villivano's record was still on top, and at this point it had become the 5th oldest record in the game, but that didn't scare him away. He was getting faster and faster each day, and in February of 2010, he finally broke through, improving the record by only 0.04 of a second. But that doesn't tell the full story. When looking at his splits, you can see he was far behind entering lap 2, but then he drove at an insane pace. With precise timing before the long platform turn, he reached 452 speed entering the loop, allowing him to reel Villivano back in over the following straight. And following through with a clean wallbang turn, it was the first ever sub-34 flying lap. Diablo was happy to have achieved this first world record, and Villivano showed great sportsmanship despite getting beaten. Everyone who was hunting the track at the time were very aware of the potential. If someone could do a run where everything went smoothly, with a start like Villivano's and 2 flying laps like Diablo's, then the record could maybe be brought under 1:47. As 2010 came to a close, it seemed the record was starting to near its limit, standing at a 1:47.32. But in February of 2011, another small time save was found by Jav, who realized that players weren't maximizing the speed on the very last part of the lap. Traditionally, the strategy had been to immediately air brake, stopping the car's rotation and landing flat, but this tended to give a tiny amount of airtime before the long finish straight. By intentionally air braking later, the car would wobble and preserve perfect downhill speed. Tiny details like this might seem insignificant, but when comparing the replays, you can see just how much of a difference it makes. Using this strategy and 3 clean wallbangs, Jav was able to get his first world record in the game. In his comment, he predicted that Kart would take it back within a week, and he almost got it correctly. 9 days later, Kart was back on top, implementing the new downhill strategy and setting a 1:47.14. Looking at it more broadly, all these optimizations did bring the records lower and lower, but the overall strategy was largely the same 3 years after the very first run on the map, just executed better. C14 Endurance was due for something more interesting to happen, and when players began looking more closely, a big breakthrough happened, when a shortcut hidden in plain sight was discovered: the overwall. On the 5th of March, the player Macron uploaded an insane run to the leaderboards. It started out seemingly normal, with him keeping up with Kart in the first couple of turns. But then, Macron did this. .38.37, by far the fastest lap 1 ever, but 2 laps of driving still remained, and Macron had considerably less speed than Kart. Holding this lead was not going to be easy. Macron tried all he could, but by the end of the second lap, his lead had completely diminished, and Kart overtook the lead midway through lap 3, and he crossed the line at a respectable 1:47.77. The strategy looked obvious, but it wasn't that easy. The overwall required going fast enough down the hill and hitting the wall in just the right way to get enough air and distance to clear the gap, and maintaining speed on the landing. After, you'd have to stay composed and drive within half a second of world record pace on the final 2 laps. Trackmania players would never pass up a strategy that saves half a second. Perhaps it was mostly because players weren't aware of it. Nowadays, when a shortcut is found, it's immediately shared on Twitter, Discord servers, YouTube, and in Twitch chats.
Oh, it's totally possible. It's totally possible.
But back then, information was spread much slower. Trackmania players discussed these things on the map forums, and if you didn't happen to see one of these two comments, you would have no idea a shortcut existed. It was only really in May of 2011 that the shortcut became widespread knowledge, after it was done on the one-lap version of the track, when the player Bortman beat the record by half a second. People at the time in the comments couldn't believe it, and everyone was eagerly awaiting the first shortcut world record on the 3-lap version. But by the time that run happened, the strategy had evolved into something even crazier. On the 15th of June 2011, the player Cottage made history on C14 Endurance, when he got this run. A 1:46.47 with a remarkable shortcut. Going into the last checkpoint, he was 1.25 seconds behind Cart, but with a bug slide on the road, he leapt directly down to the grass, skipping the last turn entirely and heading straight for the finish line, ending the run in style with a beautiful wall climb. The record was a stunning achievement, but it was also met with big controversy in the community. From this point onwards, C14 Endurance would never be the same, and it joined a long list of tracks that had been broken after bug sliding was discovered in 2009. On any map where you could jump and land sideways into a sharp turn, holding a bug slide would often be faster than regular driving. Bug slides really divided the community, because as much as the people who loved shortcuts were happy to see a cool new trick discovered, the players who'd competed for 3 years driving as intended were understandably upset. Trackmania has no separate leaderboards for shortcut and non-shortcut times, and they feared that before long, their accomplishments in optimizing the track would be swept off the top 10 list, only being remembered in people's memories. In the following days, a huge discussion was had in the track's comment section. The player Enrix argued that Trackmania is about going from point A to point B, while passing through all the checkpoints in the fastest time possible, no matter how. And the player Kenny KJC questioned to what extent people held that belief, wondering if at some point, strategies would get so ridiculous that perhaps they go too far, saying, what if an even more absurd bug is found? How bad does a bug have to be before we say we can't allow it? What if there was a bug that let you fly, or skip checkpoints, or go through walls, etc.? For me, this bug crossed the line of acceptability when it looks like a cheat. Other than being able to vent frustrations, not much resulted from these discussions. Cottage's record and all the other bug slide records remained atop the leaderboard. There were no rules against using bugs that exist within the game to achieve records, and nor would it make sense for the leaderboard moderators to impose one. To some, the bug slide discovery was a breath of fresh air, making the track go from almost maxed out to having a lot more potential for those willing to adapt. Cottage himself kept hunting C14, and later the same day, he managed to improve again. Entering the last lap, he was only marginally ahead of his old record, but he knew there was time to gain, as his ghost slowed down far too much in the long turn, and by daring to go faster, he gained half a second through the section leading up to the shortcut. In the bug slide, he got flung wide earlier, landing quicker down on the grass, and enabling him to drive a more direct line towards the finish. 1:45.51, a much stronger record with a super clean shortcut, only really leaving a little bit to be desired in the first 2 laps. In the following weeks and months, a few more people managed to do the shortcut, including Macron, who returned to the track. This time he had abandoned the wall climb as the bug slide was far easier to execute, and gained more time. Shortly after, Cottage would improve for a 3rd time down to a 1:45.34, gaining all of the time against his personal best in the shortcut segment, with an incredible sequence of bounces down onto the grass, and further solidifying himself atop the ranks. Many other ideas were tried during this period, such as doing the bug slide in all 3 laps. At first, it would seem that by doing the skip in lap 1, you could gain around 4 seconds, but the lead is only temporary. As you have no speed for the next 30 seconds of driving, the intended way quickly catches up again. It was also theorized that you could do the wall climb in either the first or the second lap, and then the bug slide in the last lap. But the difficulty of doing both of these tricks in a single run cannot be overstated. To put it into perspective, you could maybe get a clean wall climb once in every 50 attempts, and say you have a 1 in 10 chance of getting a quick bug slide onto the grass. That gives around a 1 in 500 chance for 2 laps being shortcut, or a 1 in 25,000 chance for shortcutting all 3 laps. And apart from the shortcuts themselves, you'd need good driving throughout. As Cottage showed, sometimes that can gain you even more time than a cut would. Suffice to say, so long as there was room for improvement shortcutting only the last lap, it was very unlikely anyone would add the trouble of doing more shortcuts. Half a year would pass with no new improvements, but in March 2012, the record was once again beaten, for the 4th time in a row by Cottage. With a microscopic 1/100th of a second improvement just for good measure. His checkpoint splits showed how much more potential there was left in the map, as he was considerably faster in lap 1 and 2, and had accumulated a half a second lead before the shortcut. Nobody else was even close, and it seemed like Cottage would remain atop the leaderboard for many years to come, had it not been for one player who wanted his first ever world record back: Jav. In August of 2012, Jav began hunting C14 endurance again. In one of his attempts, he had a particularly slow start and decided that instead of just resetting, he would give the old wall climb shortcut a go. And to his surprise, he actually landed it, resulting in a 38:58 lap 1. And as he was one of the fastest players on C14 the intended way, he managed to hold on to the lead until the 3rd lap, where he also unveiled a new shortcut strategy. (1:45.15). For the first time in almost 2 years, he was back on top of the leaderboard, with a shortcut strategy that looked dubious at first. Landing sideways on the grass didn't seem optimal at all, and he lost time to Cottage in the final segment. So what was the big idea? Well, 2 days later, Jav finally managed to do what he was going for properly, when he got this run on C14. (1:44.27), a spectacular improvement on the track. Instead of landing in a bug slide with the nose down like everyone before him had done, Jav discovered he could immediately air brake, which combined with turning sideways gave him a wheelie bug slide. This type of bug slide not only carries more speed, but it also allowed him to crash the outside wall, redirecting his car with a straighter line towards the finish, saving 1 second in the last segment alone. Players in the community were stunned by this record, and it really wasn't clear how others could manage to beat it. His first laps were both quick, getting a 39.2 and a 34.07, and his last lap was essentially perfect. But Jav still had some unfinished business, and in a Chad move, he started hunting the intended way record shortly after, a mark that was still at 1:47.14 by kart, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it didn't take him long to beat it, achieving the first ever 1:46 intended way. When the shortcut was discovered, it was thought that players who attempted the shortcut would never achieve the skill of the normal way record, but in the span of a couple of days, Jav had summited both categories. truly marking himself as the best C14 endurance player. And after Cottage saw the record, he decided to throw in the towel. Despite dominating the leaderboard for over a year, he couldn't see himself contesting it anymore, saying how Jav's record looked insurmountable. 1:44.27 was so ridiculous for its time that it nearly ended all activity on C14 endurance. In the same month as Jav posted it, only one more record was set in the top 10 before a full year would pass with no new records. In October of 2013, Racehans achieved a 3rd place on the track, but after that, several years would pass with no new top 10 times, as Trackmania had entered an era of low activity. As 2018 came around, the 1:44.27 was among the oldest standing world records in the game, and the community were trying to think of new ways to beat it. There was still the possibility of including wall climb shortcuts, but even if you wanted to go through that grind, the lead that it would give you was hardly much to work with against Jav's stunning last lap. A far more promising idea had been found on the map by the player Yuki, and it first became widely discussed after Jav himself showcased it in a video of undone shortcuts. Yuki had figured out that if you bug slide in one of the first 2 laps, with the old strategy of letting the nose pitch down at a really precise angle, you could sometimes crash the back wheels in such a way that it lifted the car up into the air, and that it might be possible to fly far enough to land back on the road after the hairpin, and if possible, this could save several seconds. The only way to find out was by trying. I myself was among the first players interested in hunting the Yuki shortcut, and in one of my sessions, I had this attempt on the map.
Holy shit, no way. What? Dude.
As a result of failing the Yuki cut, I had accidentally discovered another potential shortcut on C14 endurance, the Yuber bug. Trackmania players have known of this bug since 2013, and used it to shortcut other maps in the past, but the conditions needed for one to be viable are rare. For lack of a better explanation, the Yuber bug happens when you bug slide into a wall, and in the moment it crashes, the game does a miscalculation, giving you a huge speed boost and launching the car into the air. On maps where Yuber bugs are used, it is rare to have much of any control at all over where the car gets launched to. You simply have to set up the car in a bug slide and hope for the best. This discovery ignited a spark in the community. In the summer of 2018, members of the shortcutting team Fastest Way Only all gathered to hunt the 1-lap version of C14, and after many days of trying, Trinity got this run. $33.94, beating the record from Trabadia by 1.46 seconds, showing that even a suboptimal Yuber bug close to the finish would save over a second against Jav's 1:44.27. Despite how absurd it looked, it was far easier to get a promising Yuber bug than a promising Yuki shortcut. Several people had gotten flights towards the finish with the Yuber bug, but nobody had landed on the road even once with the Yuki. So on the 25th of July, players first started trying to Yuber bug on the real version of C14. Hunting the map this way was tedious, as you'd have to drive clean lines for 1.5 minutes just to get one attempt at the Yuber bug. But it was made more fun by playing the track online together, where everyone raced at the same time, and if you crashed, you could spectate your friends for the remainder of their runs. That evening, nobody could have foreseen what was about to happen, but we were all in the right place at the right time to witness magic. When out of nowhere, Heffest got this run.
standard comments. Go green
Okay.
those.
Hefest? Hefest? Hef? No! No!
Wait, what? Hefest, what? 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 That what?
In the finish line!
Yo! No way!
Are you f***ing kidding me?
I just stepped back into the game just to see him fall into the finish. What the fuck, Hefest?
Now we go for 2 Ubers.
What the
Eternal world record.
1:41.80, a new world record by 2.5 seconds. One can only imagine how Kenny must have reacted to Hefest flying across the stadium on the same map he warned others about bugs getting too absurd on. His wildest hypothetical scenario had just become a reality. The probability of getting a Yuber bug from the last checkpoint, soaring across half the stadium, and landing directly at the finish line in only 2 hours of playing was so astronomically low that it should never have happened. But there it was, atop the leaderboards, and etched into Trackmania history forever. It was the ultimate way to beat one of the oldest world records in the game, finally dethroning Jav's record that had stood in first place for over 2,100 days, and replacing it with a new run that might become just as legendary. Nobody could see how anyone would manage to beat this, not even Hefest, who himself said, "If anyone beats this record, I am quitting Trackmania." People were already discouraged from going up against a 144, and a 141.80 was an absolute no-go, and for the next year, Hefest predictably remained on top of the leaderboard. But this isn't where the story ends. In the end of 2019, a big project called Nadeo es Nadeo was started, where players from the entire community would collectively try to beat all 65 world records before the year ended. Many of the strongest records had already been beaten earlier in the year, making many believe that beating all 65 records could happen. However, in order to do that, someone would have to beat Hefest's insane record on C14, a task that was not at all going to be easy. But as the project was nearing completion, many players got inspired to at least try. The community had gotten to 56 out of 65 records beaten, and C14 strategies were actively discussed. The first promising idea was found by Aestas, where you could do an alternative to the shortcut from the beta. Instead of flipping out to the left, you could aim far to the right in the big loop, crashing against a scenery block and getting pushed down to the road below. You would have to maintain enough speed to make the jump thereafter, but if done correctly, this could save over 1 second. Then the old wall climb still existed to save another half a second or so, and then there was of course the Yuki cut. In this discussion, players realized they had overlooked a crucial detail that could make the Yuki shortcut work. In the second checkpoint, there's a big speed difference in the first lap and in the flying laps, and when attempting the Yuki shortcut, this difference is vital. As with more speed, you will land closer to the wall with the back tire, and the bounce should take you higher and further. After testing it with high speed, it didn't take long before the shortcut was done for the first time on a practice map. Calculations were done with a segmented run, which showed that a proper Yuki cut can save about 4 seconds. Not enough on its own to beat Hefest, but if combined with the bug slide shortcut in lap 3, you stood a really strong chance at beating the unbeatable run. But the odds of getting a run like this were ridiculously low, as even with the additional speed, the Yuki shortcut is so precise that it can hardly be pulled off more than 1 in every 100 attempts. And because you are doing this in the second lap, each attempt takes a long time as well. The community was more excited than ever, realizing that if everyone tried it, there was a high chance someone would eventually land it in a run. In December of 2019, we all gathered on an online server, trying to get the Yuki cut, and we got many promising attempts.
Oh, this is good. Not enough bounce. Ender!
Unfortunately though, as the fireworks were ignited on New Year's Eve, nobody had managed to get the Yuki and a bug slide in the same run, and Hefest's 141.80 was only one of 9 records that went unbeaten that year. But while the community was unsuccessful, Some were motivated to keep going, such as Aestas, Dennis, and Casper. They wanted to see it through, and finally beat the C14 endurance record. Early in 2020, they all improved their personal bests, failing by just the tiniest margins several times. And everyone else was eagerly following, wondering just who might be the first to break the record. On the 2nd of April 2020, history was made when Dennis got this run. (1:40:57), a monumental accomplishment with an absurdly clean Yuki shortcut, followed by a fantastic bug slide, climbing over the wall just as Heffest is falling out of the sky, beating the record that was never supposed to be beaten. And though it wasn't as flashy, Dennis's run was a result of over 300 hours of hunting. During that time, he had to endure countless failed attempts, losing 8 clean Yuki shortcuts before getting a good bug slide in the last lap. Finally, his extreme determination and precision had landed him in the top spot. C14 Endurance now had 5 unique shortcuts discovered. Whatever strategy you would go for, beating the record now was much harder than it had ever been, and pretty much everyone stopped trying. Everyone except for one player, Aestas. As 2021 came around, he had tried the map on and off for over 1 year, and just like Dennis, seen his fair share of heartbreaking fails. Successful lap 2 cuts were so few and far between that failing one would have been extremely discouraging, knowing that it could be many hours until you'd get your next chance. Aestas had many of these fails, and despite all the misses, he kept going, since he knew he had the pace. He was the new fastest player on the track, having beaten both the normal way record and the classic bug slide shortcut record at a stunning 1:42:96. He was hunting the track every day, patiently waiting for just one more chance, where the Yuki shortcut worked and he could have his moment. And on the 19th of January 2021, Aestas finally got this run. 1:39:50. Finally, after so much time, he had landed the Yuki shortcut and combined it with a good bug slide, also doing it more than 1 second faster than Dennis, becoming the first player to beat C14 Endurance in less than 100 seconds. It was a jaw-dropping run on the map, driving a ridiculous 38-second first lap, followed by a flawless Yuki shortcut, and in the last lap, a clean bug slide onto the grass and using the statue to flip faster into the finish. As with many world records before, this one made many feel like C14 Endurance was officially maxed out, and the record wouldn't be improved further. And if it would, it couldn't possibly be by much anymore. And once again, they were wrong. Throughout the history of C14, the records have belonged to those with the most endurance, to the most passionate, who were willing to overcome 3 wall bangs, a ridiculous overwall, bug sliding onto the grass, and now bug sliding into a rare high bounce. And if you were willing to go this far, what's another Yuki shortcut? Enter Dennis090. The idea of shortcutting all 3 laps in the same run is completely mental. A lap 1 Yuki is far more improbable than doing it in lap 2, and requires a different line, landing closer to the inside of the turn with the nose down. And with less speed, there is no margin for error on the bounce. But after Dennis discovered it was possible in 2022, his mind was set. This is the run he wanted. And over the course of the next year, he dedicated another 500 hours towards trying to achieve it, playing it every day when he had time available. He wanted to make history. On the 20th of September 2023, one of the greatest runs of all time in Trackmania was driven, when Dennis got this run. (1:37:65), beating Aestas by another 1.85 seconds, and doing it in style, with a spin onto the grass in the last lap. This run is for now as far as the world record on C14 Endurance has been pushed, and if we've learned anything from the past, we'd be careful to say it won't be improved further in the future. Dennis's world record is the result of 16 years of strategy innovations, to save just over 10 seconds against the first top records on the map, and a personal commitment of over 800 hours to reach the goal he set for himself. When the developers patched out the loop cut in the beta testing of Trackmania Nations Forever, they could have never foreseen what other shortcuts lie in wait on the track. But if you ask them now, I think they'd say they are happy they never spotted them, because if they did, then we'd never get to witness these amazing and iconic achievements in Trackmania history. All it takes to rewrite the story is one person, dedicated enough to raise the bar higher one more time. And as I was making this video, Aestas improved his personal best and is closing in on the record once again. Only time will tell where it finally ends up. If you enjoyed this video, I have many other Trackmania documentaries on this channel, and you can find them all in a playlist here. Also, if you want to watch more Trackmania content while you wait for the next documentary, I have a second channel where I upload a video every single day. That's all for now, thank you for watching everybody, and until next time, have a good one.